Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Steve returned home after a 5-day trip, he expected peace, not a secret gas pipeline illegally buried beneath his land. What began as a strange discovery turned into a war of forged signatures, corruption, and one man's relentless fight for justice. I'd only been gone for 5 days. 5 damn days. It was supposed to be a simple trip, a break really. My cousin Jeremy had just gotten back from his 3rd deployment with the Marines, and I flew out to Virginia to surprise him at his welcome home barbecue. We'd spent nights around the fire pit, talking about things we never really talk about, drinking too much bourbon, reminiscing about how we used to throw cherry bombs in soda cans when we were kids. I came back tired but content. I hadn't thought about work, clients, or permits even once. Life had finally slowed down. Until I got home. The first thing I noticed as I turned onto the long gravel drive that cuts through my 22 acres north of Reno was the way the sun hit the western tree line differently. Something looked off. At first, I chalked it up to shadows. Nevada sunsets can play tricks on you. But as I pulled up to the house and got out, that uneasy itch started crawling up the back of my neck. I walked toward the west perimeter, boots crunching dry underbrush. The land slopes gently out there, nothing fancy. Just sagebrush, pine, and quiet. But halfway down the western edge, where the property line runs parallel to the HOA development, the dirt had been disturbed. It wasn't a mess. Whoever did it tried to be careful. The trench had been filled back in, smoothed over, and tamped down. But I've lived here long enough to know what my own soil looks like. This was darker, richer, freshly turned. The contrast was clear as hell. I crouched down, digging my fingers into the dirt, softer than the rest, packed but not settled. Maybe a utility line repair, maybe an emergency crew missed a flag. I didn't panic, not yet. I walked the length of the disturbance, maybe 60 yards long, straight as a rifle shot. No markers, no flags, no stakes. Just a faint indentation in the earth and that unnatural strip of disturbed soil running right along the inside of my property line. I went inside, poured myself a glass of water I didn't need, then walked into my workshop. That scanner had been collecting dust for years, but I kept it clean, calibrated. Old habits die hard. It was a handheld ground-penetrating radar unit, top tier back in my energy sector days, capable of mapping underground pipelines, voids, metal, composite. I used to scan drilling sites for unstable cavities and pressure lines in tight formations. Now I use it to avoid burying my damn septic tank under the new shed. I hauled it out, booted it up, calibrated the sweep, and walked the length of the western border. There it was, 4 feet below the surface. Narrow bore line, continuous. Artificial material, possibly plastic composite or flexible steel. The signature was unmistakable. A pipeline. New. Still resonating with thermal differential, I froze. Not out of fear, out of sheer disbelief. I cross-checked the scanner 3 times. Same depth, same material, same trajectory. A straight shot that didn't belong. And I sure as hell didn't install it. I stood there in the Nevada twilight, sweat beating under my collar, despite the dry breeze. There are moments in a man's life when the world shifts beneath his boots, not because of violence or tragedy, but because of absurdity. Because something so fundamentally insane happens that your brain just stalls out trying to process the stupidity. Someone had installed a pipeline under my land without telling me. I drove back to the house, hands trembling just enough to be irritating, and opened the county utility portal. No open work orders, no emergency reports, no permits issued in the past 90 days for my address or surrounding parcels. Nothing. I called the emergency line for Washoe County Utilities, sat through 2 menu trees, finally got a live person. Hi, this is Stephen Miller. I live just off Old Juniper Pass. I think someone might have installed a utility line. No active utility construction in that area, sir. You sure? Nothing from the gas company? Nothing. We'd have permits on file. Next morning, I drove into town and spoke with a clerk at the regional planning department. She confirmed it in person. No permits. No notifications, no recorded easements, no flagged work orders. Now I wasn't just uneasy, I was pissed. By the 3rd day, I'd walked every neighbor within shouting distance. Most were cordial. Some shrugged and said they hadn't seen anything. But then I hit pay dirt. Guy named Carl, retired dentist. Nice enough. Oh, that line? He said, squinting toward my place. Yeah, they put that in while you were gone. Karen said it was part of the Hillside Ridge infrastructure upgrade, gas pipeline or something. They started by her place and ran it down to the lot behind yours. I blinked. Karen Rydell, president of the HOA. Got a bunch of us signed up for the new gas install. Think you're next on the line, actually. No, I said. I'm not part of the HOA, and nobody signed shit on my behalf. Carl looked confused, then a little nervous. Huh. Well, maybe there was a mix-up. I thanked him and walked away calmly. But inside, I was burning. Back at the house, I opened the state's online infrastructure tracking tool. Found a new entry listed under Hillside Ridge HOA, designated as a residential line replacement and expansion. The map showed a faint gray line cutting right along the western edge of my property. It didn't list my name. It didn't mention me at all. Instead, it said, "Install private gas line along western perimeter, parcel B19, my parcel." They didn't just dig into my land. They tried to bury me under it. There's a special kind of anger that bubbles up when someone violates your land, not scratches your truck or lets their dog crap on your porch, but digs into your earth, slices through it like it's theirs, buries steel in it, and doesn't even have the decency to lie about it to your face. I wasn't going to let it slide. I wasn't wired that way. The next morning, I brought in someone I trusted, Matt Jarvis, a licensed geodetic surveyor I'd worked with a few times in the energy sector. I wanted hard data, third-party confirmation. We spent 4 hours walking the perimeter, hammering in markers, scanning subsurface layers, and confirming pipe location, depth, composition, and direction. When we were done, Matt whistled through his teeth. "Steve," he said, "this thing is tight to your boundary. They missed your water well by maybe 4 feet, and the trench ran right past that cleared patch. What were you putting in there, a carport?" "Yeah," I said. "Steel frames already fabricated." He shook his head. "They put a gas line under future structural load. That's not just illegal, it's criminally negligent." I paid Matt and filed his report with the county. Then I pulled together a claim. Damages to property, violation of land rights, unauthorized use, and increased liability risk due to hazardous placement. I totaled up estimated repair, delay costs for the carport, mitigation if the well were contaminated, and added what I thought was a generous settlement amount, $100,000 even. HOA could either pay up or start digging for a way to fix the mess they created. I hand-delivered the claim to the Hillside Ridge HOA office. Clean envelope, signed receipt, polite smile. 2 days later, I received a large yellow envelope delivered by private courier. Inside was a formal complaint filed in Washoe County District Court. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or flip the damn table. They were suing me. I read the complaint 3 times. The core accusations: that I had deliberately interfered with authorized infrastructure improvements, that I had tampered with a public utility installation, a private line, mind you, and that I was endangering the health and safety of the broader community by disturbing regulated gas assets. They claimed I'd illegally excavated and damaged a pressurized line, and that I was jeopardizing access to energy during critical modernization efforts. I wanted to punch something. Instead, I opened a new legal pad and wrote 2 words across the top: full war. I needed to know how they'd even justified stepping onto my land. So I did the most dangerous thing a pissed-off ex-engineer can do. I started digging through bureaucracy. And that's when I found it. In the county records database, buried under misfiled paperwork from 6 weeks prior, was an easement agreement. My name was on it. My parcel was listed. My signature wasn't mine. It was a scanned PDF, not a digital record. Sloppy. The signature looked passable to a casual observer, but the loop on the M in Miller was wrong. And I never, ever write Stephen. I go by Steve, always. Worse yet, the document had been notarized in Las Vegas. I haven't been south of Tonopah in over 3 years. There was also a recorded memo from the HOA board minutes noting that all owners along the corridor from parcel B17 through B20 have consented in writing or verbally. Which was bullshit. I'm B19? No one contacted me. No one asked for my consent. The audacity of it made my jaw ache. I started gathering every camera angle I had from the week I was gone. Nothing directly showed the trenching. Whoever ran the line worked fast and probably did it at night, but the date stamps matched the public logs from the contractor hired by the HOA. That's when another piece fell into place. I tracked the contractor listed on the HOA project sheet, Silver Rock Utilities. They're legit, mid-sized, licensed across 3 states. But when I looked up their project license filing with the State Gas Safety Board, I noticed something odd. Under parcel owner for the trench section, my section, they'd left the name blank. Instead, it just read, Western Border Installed B, 19 Consented Corridor. Vague, deliberate, designed to slip under the radar. So, they didn't just trespass. They engineered a whole paper trail of fraud to make it look like I'd rolled over for them. That same evening, I took a walk past the HOA office, not to cause trouble, just to observe. They were hosting a community meeting. People were walking in with snacks and bottled water, casual smiles on their faces, the same people who'd waved at me 6 months ago, now whispering when they saw me pass. I caught part of the conversation as I stood near the open window. Karen says we'll all get rebates on install if the corridor finishes this month. Yeah, she promised my heating bill would drop 30%. Says the last holdout's being handled legally. Holdout. That was me. They'd already spun the story. I was the obstructionist, the selfish outsider, the guy who wanted to stop progress. Karen had weaponized neighborly goodwill, turned me into the villain, and now they were being paid for it. I've always believed in 2 kinds of war, the one you fight with bullets and the one you fight with paperwork. This one was going to be a barrage of both, but instead of bullets, I had affidavits, expert reports, and decades of regulatory code on my side. The first step was legal. I called in Scott Halprin, a lawyer I'd worked with years ago on an environmental liability case out of Elko. Smart, fast, and mean in a suit. When I told him what happened, there was a pause on the line. They sued you? Yep. And they forged an easement to do it. Looks that way. He gave a slow whistle. All right, Steve, let's cut their legs out. We filed a formal counterclaim in district court. Trespass, forgery, fraud, unjust enrichment, risk to private water resources, unauthorized use of private land for corporate benefit. We asked for $150,000 in compensatory damages and a preliminary injunction to freeze all related construction activity until discovery was complete. But I wasn't done. I needed this thing hit from every angle. I reached out to a former colleague from the State Gas Safety Office, Janice Elwood, now in regulatory compliance. We'd worked together back when I still wore a badge and a hard hat. I sent her the survey maps, footage, and a clean breakdown of the pipe's location in relation to my well and construction site. Her reply was quick. Steve, this violates 3 installation codes. If what you sent me holds up in inspection, they're in deep shit. That's when I sent her Matt's geodetic survey and a copy of the HOA's contractor license with the missing parcel owner section. She didn't reply with words this time. She just forwarded it to the Nevada Contractor Licensing Board and CC'd me. I smiled. Then I went full throttle. I submitted a formal complaint to the Nevada Gas Infrastructure Oversight Division, citing the unpermitted line, falsified documentation, and safety risk within 15 feet of a private well. The combination of forged easement and proximity to a drinking water source gave them grounds to open a priority investigation. Next, I filed with the State Board of Professional Engineers targeting Silver Rock Utilities. I attached their work orders, the forged permit from the HOA, and photos from Matt's survey showing pipeline encroachment under a future construction zone. I wasn't just throwing mud, I was bringing down the whole hill. But I knew Karen wouldn't just sit there and watch me dismantle her little empire. She fired back in typical HOA fashion, with volume, gossip, and a touch of fascist theater. First, I received an email from Hillside Ridge concerned residents titled Endangering the Community, a Call to Action. It accused me of trying to sabotage affordable energy access, jeopardize elderly residents' safety, and harass field workers just doing their job. I nearly spit out my coffee. Then came the door flyers, glossy, full-color crap printed on HOA budget paper. Don't let one man stand in the way of safety. Support Hillside Ridge's modernization plan. My name wasn't printed, but it didn't have to be. I started getting cold shoulders at the gas station. One of my neighbors, the same guy who borrowed my snowplow last winter, didn't look me in the eye as he paid for coffee. People I'd waved to for years now crossed the street when I approached. It was impressive, in a sick way. Karen had turned the narrative faster than a politician in a scandal, but she wasn't expecting what came next. I had a little engineering trick up my sleeve. I returned to the scanned site on the western boundary and marked out the pipe's entry and exit points again. Then, using one of my old diagnostic toolkits, originally designed to monitor gas flow consistency in temporary lines, I installed a passive telemetry probe inside a nearby access valve they'd carelessly left unsecured. It wasn't sabotage, it was a sensor, totally legal. The probe captured gas flow, pressure fluctuations, and internal vibration signatures every 2 hours. I rigged it to store the data offline, encrypted. Within 72 hours, I had all the proof I needed. The line wasn't dormant, it was live. Someone had turned it on. The signature spikes matched usage patterns. It was feeding a home, maybe multiple. That meant the line wasn't just a trespass. It was an active, unauthorized commercial pipeline operating on private land without owner consent. The data would be enough to torpedo Karen's whole case, if not her presidency. That night, I opened a bottle of rye whiskey, sat at the table, and stared at the blinking readout from the probe's console. Every spike was a pulse. Every pulse, a lie they'd buried 4 feet under my soil. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet, because I knew damn well this wasn't the end. It was the opening salvo. When you go after snakes, you don't just watch the grass. You follow the trail they leave behind. Slimy, hidden, winding through paperwork and petty alliances. The telemetry probe had done its job. I now had hard proof that the line wasn't just trespassing. It was operational, actively feeding gas to multiple properties. I forwarded the data to my attorney, to the state board, and to Janice. Their replies were almost comical in how fast they came. "Christ, Steve, that's the smoking gun," Scott said on the phone. "You just turned this from civil trespass into felony infrastructure misuse," Janice confirmed. The line violated not just building code, but federal pipeline regulations for private land crossings without easement. And yet, the HOA wasn't backing off. In fact, things got quieter. Too quiet. That's when I knew something was off. I dug deeper into the contractor files, specifically the procurement records for the Hillside Ridge Pipeline project. The paper trail led back to a firm I hadn't heard of before, Horizon Works Infrastructure Solutions, listed as Engineering Oversight and Compliance Reviewer. Odd title, vague mandate. Even stranger, their registered address was a P.O. box in Carson City. The listed contact was Randall C. No last name. I smelled a rat. I pulled corporate records from the state registry. Horizon Works was registered to a Randall Clark, a former city planner turned private consultant, and former husband of none other than Karen Rydell. The moment I saw that last name pop up, everything clicked. Karen hadn't just pushed the project, she'd streamlined the permit process through back channels. She wasn't some overzealous HOA tyrant. She was a cog in a much larger, dirtier machine. I didn't stop there. I found that the easement authorization supposedly notarized in Las Vegas had been certified by a notary named Eliza McKinney, an employee of a legal firm that, surprise, surprise, had Horizon Works as a client. When I called the firm to confirm the notary log, the receptionist stuttered. "Oh, that date. I think Eliza was out of state then, at a wedding, but I'll check." She never called back. I filed for an administrative subpoena to freeze the permit history connected to the Hillside Ridge expansion. That's when things blew open. The expedited approval for the project had been greenlit by a county official named Maureen Clark, Randall's new wife, and the current Deputy Director of Land Use and Development. So there it was, a corrupt circle. Karen, the HOA president, sells the need for infrastructure modernization. Her ex-husband Randall, through Horizon Works, acts as the engineering oversight. His current wife Maureen fast-tracks the permits, bypassing normal checks. Silver Rock installs the pipeline based on those falsified permits and fake easements. And my land becomes their free underground freeway. It wasn't just illegal, it was orchestrated. I gathered all of it. Corporate links, marriage records, emails from the procurement filings, metadata from the notarized PDFs, and submitted it to the Washoe County District Attorney's Office as part of an official complaint. This wasn't just trespass now, it was conspiracy, fraud, and abuse of public office. I didn't stop there. I leaked selected documents anonymously to a friend of mine who ran a small but loud blog covering Nevada political corruption. The article that dropped 3 days later was titled, "Gaslighted: How One Man's Backyard Became the Front Line of Nevada's Infrastructure Graft." That's when Karen showed up. It was dusk. I was adjusting one of the floodlight cameras near the back gate when her Lexus rolled up to the edge of my property like a lioness pacing at the edge of a rival's territory. She didn't get out, just rolled down the window. "You're really going to burn the whole neighborhood down over a pipe?" I stared at her for a moment. "No, Karen, I'm going to burn down the lie you buried under my land." She didn't reply, just rolled the window back up and drove off into the dust. The next morning, I got a call from Scott. "They're scrambling," he said. "The DA's office issued a formal inquiry into Horizon Works and the land office, and the state's compliance board wants a full audit." "Good," I said. I'd been accused, sued, slandered, made out to be the villain. But now, the tide was turning, and I wasn't done digging. It's one thing to be sued. It's another to be ostracized. The air changed in Hillside Ridge. People who used to wave at me from their porches now pretended they didn't see me. The guy who once brought me zucchini from his garden now crossed the street when I walked my dog. Even the gas station clerk, a kid I'd tipped every Christmas, looked at me like I'd pulled a gun instead of a gallon of milk. Karen's campaign wasn't just bureaucratic anymore, it was personal. She'd taken the HOA propaganda machine and turned it into a full-scale smear effort. Flyers, social media posts, even a low-budget video circulating online. One man's obstruction is everyone's danger. It showed edited clips of construction workers struggling to finish work, voiceovers warning about delays caused by one disgruntled landowner, and cherry-picked lines from court filings that made me sound like a cross between Ted Kaczynski and Lex Luthor. Then came the so-called Neighbor Incentive Program. That one was clever. Every homeowner who signed a support letter for the HOA's modernization plan got a $1,000 deduction from their annual dues and a voucher for priority gas line activation. Karen framed it as a community building rebate, but it was bribery, wrapped in a bow and delivered with a clipboard. I saw it in real time. The pressure built like slow poison. A family 2 lots down that I'd helped clear snow from their roof last winter suddenly filed a noise complaint against me for construction after dark. I hadn't touched a hammer in weeks. Another neighbor told me I was jeopardizing property values and should think about the children. I started to feel like a leper in my own backyard, but I didn't stop. The engineering probe I'd installed kept collecting data, flow patterns, operational hours, temperature fluctuations. The pipeline wasn't just active, it was running near max capacity during the evenings. I cross-referenced it with power usage data from nearby homes using public utility dashboards. The pattern lined up too neatly. Then came the jackpot. On a hunch, I pulled the most recent inspection logs from the HOA's contractor, Silver Rock Utilities. They were required by law to submit weekly status updates to the County Infrastructure Board. Most were routine, until I found an entry marked Payment Schedule, Tier Early Installations. It listed addresses of the first properties connected to the new line, and among them, Karen Rydell's home, her assistant's house, and 2 properties that had recently been transferred into a trust owned by RC Holdings. RC Randall Clark. That wasn't just nepotism. That was financial self-dealing. I sent it straight to Scott. Within 24 hours, he'd filed a supplemental complaint attaching evidence of personal enrichment, conflict of interest, and unauthorized use of HOA funds for selective benefits. Meanwhile, my probe recorded a sudden dip in pressure, an anomaly. I checked the logs and spotted activity consistent with a valve manipulation event. Someone had tried to shut the line off for a moment, then brought it back online. I wondered, did they find the sensor? Didn't matter. I had days of logs archived. Let them yank it. The damage was done. I started receiving anonymous texts from a spoofed number. Things like, "You don't want this to get uglier, Steve. You've made your point. Now shut it down. You're hurting your neighbors. Think about that." I reported it to the sheriff's office, but without a direct threat, it was a dead end. Still, it confirmed what I already knew. They were scared. The next morning, someone egged my truck. Juvenile, pathetic, but effective. I stood there, staring at the dried yolk baking into my windshield under the Nevada sun, and felt something twist in my chest. I wasn't angry, not in the usual way. I was focused. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about how easy it was to get rolled over when enough signatures and smiles cover up the rot underneath. I spent the next 3 days building a new system, a website, HOAs.com, simple black background, white text, 1 page, timeline of the gas pipeline project, copies of the forged easement, data from the telemetry probe, maps, screenshots of HOA payments to properties with internal connections, and an embedded form titled, "Have you been threatened by your HOA?" I didn't put my name on it, but people knew. And they started sharing. Within 48 hours, I had emails from 3 other property owners who claimed the HOA had tried similar stunts years ago on smaller scales. A fence here, a tree there. One guy said his driveway had been dug up under a beautification initiative. By the weekend, the HOA board was in full-blown panic mode. Karen sent out a mass email to all residents claiming the site was fake news and the work of a disgruntled, unstable individual. I printed it out and framed it, because when they start calling you unstable, that's when you know they're about to break. They say you can't win against an HOA. They say they always have deeper pockets, more lawyers, tighter connections, but I wasn't interested in winning the way they defined it. I wanted the truth to drag itself across the courtroom floor and stink up every corner of their pristine narrative. I didn't want a quiet settlement. I wanted scorched earth. The court hearing was held at the Washoe County District Courthouse, a modern glass block that tried too hard to look humble. The day of the trial, I wore a charcoal gray suit and my old engineer's watch, the same one I used to wear on site when checking pipeline welds in -20 wind. I walked in with Scott at my side and 2 black hard-shell cases, one with paper files and one with hardware. Karen showed up flanked by her counsel and 2 HOA board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She wore that same smug look I'd seen in every boardroom where someone thought they were untouchable. But today, she was about to find out what touch really meant. The judge, an older woman with the glare of a lifelong no-bullshit policy, called the session to order. Opening arguments were expectedly dry. Karen's attorney leaned into public good, modernization, community safety, claimed I'd interfered with infrastructure necessary for winter energy needs, endangered workers, and tampered with active lines. Then came our turn. Scott stood, calm and clinical. "Your Honor, the defendant did not interfere. He protected. The plaintiffs entered private land without consent, using forged documents, and installed active gas infrastructure in violation of local, state, and federal law." Then I was called to testify. First, I laid out the facts, my property boundaries, the lack of HOA affiliation, the absence of any recorded or verbal easement, and my discovery of the unauthorized pipeline. I introduced the telemetry probe data, clear time-stamped readings of gas flow, pressure cycles, and usage spikes consistent with residential heating patterns. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, peering over her glasses, "are you qualified to collect and interpret this data?" I nodded. I spent 15 years as a safety systems engineer in energy infrastructure. I've worked with flow telemetry systems more advanced than this one in conditions that would kill a cell phone in 30 seconds. What I presented is well within the accuracy range accepted by the Nevada Energy Board. Then came the kicker. I opened the second case and pulled out a portable display. With the court's permission, I connected it to a monitor and played security footage from a neighbor's property. Footage I'd received anonymously just a week prior. It showed 2 unmarked trucks, headlights off, pulling up to the boundary between Hillside Ridge and my land about 2 hours and 17 minutes in the morning. The timestamp matched the trenching window identified in the telemetry logs. Night vision clearly captured workers with Silver Rock logos on their gear, stepping over my property line and digging. The footage ran for 2.5 minutes before cutting off. Enough. Gasps. A few murmurs. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Rydell, is this the standard procedure for infrastructure development in your community?" Karen stammered. I had no knowledge of nighttime activity. Our contractor must have..." The judge cut her off. "Then your contractor will be named in the next phase of proceedings. For now, let's focus on your signature." Scott passed forward a blow-up of the forged easement. We had a handwriting expert ready. A side-by-side comparison showed that the signature had several critical inconsistencies. Most damning of all, the use of Stephen instead of Stephen, a detail no one outside of government billing had ever made. We also introduced the notary log from Las Vegas, where Eliza McKinney had supposedly verified the signature, and a signed affidavit from her own office stating she was out of state on the date listed. That's when the energy in the room changed. Karen's expression collapsed into something between nausea and panic. Then Scott laid down the final card, the financial trail. He presented documents showing Karen's home and her assistant's home were among the first connected to the illegal line. Then the trust documents linking two other connected parcels to RC Holdings, owned by Randall Clark. And finally, the county approval records signed by Maureen Clark, Randall's wife, authorizing the project through an expedited corridor that had only been used twice in the last 5 years, both times by Horizon Works. The judge called a recess. Outside the courtroom, Karen sat on a bench, head in her hands. Her lawyer paced like a man already calculating how many billable hours he'd be able to salvage from the wreckage. Scott stood beside me, arms crossed. "You realize this just moved from civil to criminal, right?" "Yeah," I said, "but I'm not done." He looked over. "What else are you planning?" I smiled. "Let's just say I still have one more pipe trick left." He didn't ask, and I didn't tell him, because I had a feeling Karen wasn't the final boss after all. There's something deeply satisfying about silence in a courtroom, not just the absence of sound, but the kind of stunned, lead-heavy stillness that settles when a lie dies publicly. That was the silence that followed the judge's ruling. She issued an immediate preliminary injunction. All pipeline operations halted, no further construction, no gas flow permitted through the line under my land. The court recognized the forgery, deemed the easement invalid, and warned that further criminal investigation may be warranted given the evidence presented. HOA's civil case dismissed with prejudice. My counterclaim proceeding to damages phase, but even that wasn't the real victory. The real victory began 48 hours later when two unmarked sedans from the Nevada State Prosecutor's Office rolled up outside the Hillside Ridge HOA's clubhouse and walked out with 3 file boxes and 2 laptops. Karen wasn't present. She'd flown to Scottsdale for rest and recovery, according to her assistant, but her office was raided nonetheless. That same afternoon, Silver Rock Utilities' license was suspended pending investigation. The Nevada Contractor Licensing Board issued a public statement citing serious regulatory violations and potential falsification of permit documentation. By the end of the week, the story had made local headlines. HOA scandal unfolds. Private gas line installed illegally on homeowner's land. But even that wasn't the top of the mountain. The day after the article dropped, I got a call from a man named Blake Gannon, a deputy investigator from the Nevada Attorney General's Public Integrity Unit. He introduced himself formally, then asked, "Mr. Miller, are you aware of a woman named Maureen Clark?" I exhaled. "Deputy Director of Land Use and Development? Yeah, I've got her signature on every fraudulent permit tied to this mess. We believe she was instrumental in pushing through unauthorized fast tracks for multiple infrastructure contracts over the past 2 years. Your case may not be isolated." Turns out my little war had blown the door open on a multi-million-dollar kickback scheme. Horizon Works, the fake engineering firm registered to Karen's ex-husband, had received at least 8 contracts tied to expedited county projects, all rubber-stamped by Maureen. The kicker? The money trail. RC Holdings, Randall Clark's company, wasn't just receiving trust deeds. It had offshore payment transfers tied to HOA funds, funneled through Horizon Works consulting fees. OA dues were being used to finance speculative land acquisitions disguised as modernization costs. That was the moment I realized Karen wasn't the boss. She was the face, the cheerleader, the distraction. The real power was Maureen, pulling strings from inside the county offices, laundering compliance through marriage ties and fake firms. The state moved fast. By the end of the month, Maureen Clark was placed on administrative leave, pending indictment for abuse of office and conspiracy to defraud. Randall Clark was subpoenaed. Silver Rock began internal purges to protect their remaining contracts. And the HOA board was forced to hold an emergency vote, stripping Karen of her title and appointing an interim president, a man named David, who showed up at my door that night with trembling hands and a bottle of scotch. "I didn't know," he said, placing the bottle on my porch table. "I swear to God, Steve, I just wanted lower utility bills." I believed him, mostly, but I didn't invite him in. I had work to do. The line was still in my ground, so I hired a private crew, not affiliated with the county, the HOA, or any shady contractor, and scheduled a full-line extraction. Cameras would document every inch. My lawyer would oversee the chain of custody. Every part of that illegal pipeline would be dug up, tagged, and held as evidence. I stood there the morning they arrived, sun just rising over the ridge, as the first shovelful of dirt came up. That thing had violated my land, my rights, and damn near my sanity. Now I was going to return it, piece by piece, to the people who thought I wouldn't fight back. They pulled the last segment of the pipe out just after noon. It came up slick with mud, covered in root scarring and chemical residue, evidence of both time and carelessness. The trench yawned open like a scar along the edge of my property, 20 inches wide and over 200 feet long. I stood beside the work crew as they cleaned the final section, packed it into a padded crate, and labeled it Evidence Item Miller Hillside Ridge HOA. God damn right it was. For a moment, I just stood there, arms crossed, breathing in the sharp metallic scent of disrupted soil. It was the first time in months my land felt quiet again. Not still, but quiet. Not violated. Free. Over the next 3 days, the trench was filled and compacted, sod laid over the top, and the surrounding trees, some of which had been damaged by the digging, were trimmed and treated by my own arborist. I paid out of pocket. I didn't care. I wanted it done right. No shortcuts, no HOA tricks, no midnight backhoes and fake permits. Just me, my land, and peace. The civil court ruled in my favor 2 weeks later. The final judgment included $330,000 in damages, including repair costs, legal fees, environmental remediation, and stress-related compensation. A court-ordered declaration of land violation permanently attached to HOA records, and the invalidity of all future HOA requests to cross my property lines under any circumstances. The criminal side, that would take longer, but it was moving. Karen was indicted on charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, document falsification, and abuse of position. Her plea deal included a 5-year suspension from any leadership roles in registered Nevada HOAs and over $90,000 in restitution to the association. Her assistant resigned under pressure. Silver Rock's license was suspended indefinitely in the state. As for Maureen Clark, the state attorney's office pursued felony charges. She lawyered up with one of Vegas's nastiest defense firms, but by then it was too late. The paper trail was solid. Randall took a deal to avoid prosecution, testifying that she was fully aware of the falsifications and had signed off knowingly. That whole empire burned from the inside. The HOA itself fractured. Half the board resigned. Dues were frozen. And Hillside Ridge became a case study in legal seminars and ethics panels across the state. But none of that gave me more satisfaction than the sign. I installed it myself, with a concrete base and 4-foot steel posts. No servitude, no trespassing, no Karen allowed. Below it, in smaller text, this property is under round-the-clock surveillance, which is confirmed by legal jurisdiction and is monitored for unauthorized access. All hidden infrastructure will be treated as hostile until proven otherwise. I meant every word. And just to drive the point home, I added something special. A fully operational weather station, solar-powered, streaming data, live to a website I built in a single weekend. It measured rainfall, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and seismic shifts. Because if they ever tried to bury something under my land again, I'd know about it within minutes. I'd become a goddamn subterranean sentinel. I still live there, still work from my study that overlooks the western boundary. I added a little sitting deck nearby, a place to drink coffee, watch the sunrise, and remind myself that no one, not even a smug HOA president with forged paperwork and a city hall connection, has the right to take what's mine. Sometimes neighbors walk by on the road. Some nod, some don't. A few even apologized. But I don't hold grudges. I hold records. This land is mine, and now everyone knows it.